All right, lovely. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Charisma Talks episode 2, coming to you live on LinkedIn. And today I have a very special guest. I believe he is sometimes known as the best executive coach in Yorkshire, and maybe further afield than that. The jury's still out yet. But Stephen, thanks very much for joining me, mate. It's lovely to have you on the show. How are things with you?
It's an absolute pleasure, Ed. And things are good. It's been a good week. The sun's shining. Looking forward to a nice weekend. So, yeah, it's all good.
Well, I usually wouldn't be able to agree with you, but the sun is out here in Manchester as well. So fingers crossed it stays a bit longer. Stephen, for anyone who hasn't met you or isn't connected with you on LinkedIn, would you give us a quick intro and a bit of an insight into who you are, what you do, and the kinds of people that you help?
Yeah, sure. So I am, as you mentioned, I'm based in Yorkshire, but I have clients all over the world. Well, maybe not quite all over the world. Africa, Europe, UK, Americas. I'm an executive and leadership coach. I work with individuals who want to kind of up their game in terms of leadership and management. Work with a lot of managing directors, CEOs, people like that. And I also do some like leadership training, team coaching, that kind of stuff. And then on the side for fun, some personal coaching as well, some personal development stuff. So yeah, a bit of a range, keeps me busy, and I enjoy it all.
Yeah, because I saw you speaking at the C2C event live in Manchester not that long ago. And what I really loved about seeing you speak live then, Stephen, is you've obviously got a depth of professional background in terms of your coaching acumen, but a little sprinkle of the kind of hippie stuff as well that goes in there that I'm a big fan of as well. The Zen, the meditation, all of these things that some people can love it or hate it. I think it's very valuable in the right dose. And so you kind of seem to straddle that professional and personal thing quite well.
Well, thank you. It's what I think is particularly the way the world is right now. Anybody that's watching this who pays attention to what you do, they're gonna be knowledge workers, right? They're gonna be people who predominantly lanyard people with a laptop. That's the way it goes. Now, everybody that does that has been through a challenging few years. And obviously a lot of us did with the pandemic and stuff like that. But particularly, I think, just to zoom in on knowledge workers, everything changed. There's like, do we work remote? Are we hybrid? Are we this? And the proliferation of different, apps that we've all got to use. We've got the Slack channel. We've got to keep this going, the WhatsApp, the email, and everything else. And so I think being a good leader or being, coping with the modern world, you need some kind of practice that keeps you centered. And my title on Twitter used to be hippie in a suit. It's not anymore, but it kind of captures the way I am. But part of the reason that I got deep into that was to cope with the stresses of modern knowledge work.
Yeah, well, I can only agree with you because, yeah, the modern world is not conducive to mental health and wellness whatsoever. And I think without something to get you back there, we will all struggle, whether it's meditation or hiking or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to get into some questions that I've got for you now around the kind of crossover of leadership and communication. That's what I want to explore with you today. But for anyone watching, let me just shout out before I do so. If you've got any questions for Stephen or myself about leadership, about public speaking, about coaching, please drop them in the chat, drop any comments, and they'll pop up as we're going live, and we will love to interact. So, Stephen, first proper question for you, mate. I often hear this word banded around, leadership communication. It's a bit of a buzzword, but I know that there is some meaning to it. What does it mean to you?
If I'm honest, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Right.
No, but what I mean by that is that every single interaction that you have as a leader, predominantly it's you talking to another person or a group of people or maybe a large group of people. And it kind of depends whether it's, is it one-to-one? Is it a small group? Do these people know you? Do they not know you? Is it asynchronous? Is it live? Is it in person? And all of that stuff, it matters. But at the end of the day, as a leader, you need to be clear about what it is you're messaging and to who, and then how you're going to do it. But underneath all of that, you just got to be a decent human, right? You've got to be a straightforward person who wants to engage with other humans. So I hear phrases like that and I know what they mean. I know that the technical bits behind it, but it's not how I access the understanding.
Yeah, I totally understand that perspective. I think maybe another way to think about it would be then, when you step up as a leader, do you think that there are certain expectations that then are given to you that are not there as a normal, someone who isn't a leader, and certain qualities that you're expected to project, certain emotions you're expected to instill in people, and that the communication element is about how you make sure you are showing that to your audience, whether it's one-on-one or to a group? So do you think there are different expectations or different requirements when you enter a leadership position that you have to then start projecting outwards?
Yeah, I think there are, but I think we get confused about them. And I think particularly anybody that's like new to this, or hasn't reflected on it, or maybe made some errors and are not quite sure why, we can fall into the trap of I'll phrase this a different way. Most organizations, if you draw them, people just reach for a hierarchical chart, right? Okay, you get the CEO, you've got the directors, you've got heads of blah, blah, blah. It's traditional. Like, we all see it that way.
Yeah.
Which means that when we go into a position that is on that thing above another person, there is almost like an instinctive thing. Well, I therefore I have power over those people, okay? And to a certain extent, of course you do, because you're the one that signs off their annual reviews and all of that kind of stuff. And also, you get paid a bit more and you have a different responsibility. But the way I see it is that it's just different. It's not that it is better or it is more, it's just different. And you need to, as a leader, understand that you are still a part of that team, even if on the boxes these people are below you, that actually you are a participant in the organization and you have a different role, which means you need to say different things in a different way. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think it partially does, but I'd like to get more into what those differences are that you think, So if we're comparing one leader to every other leader in different organizations at a certain, let's say, a CEO role, are there some similarities that they all need to be projecting, whether it's warmth, authority, trust? Obviously, we all want to have these qualities, the kind of, the things that everyone would want to have a bit of. But is there anything that you think is particularly important when you are stepping into that leadership role?
For me, the number one would be clarity, and then number two would be consistency, and then number three would be honesty. Because those things really matter. Because of what I spoke about before, that where you move up the org chart and you have this different responsibility, also people then are looking to you. And quite often, I've risen up that chart. I was a national director in the National Institute of Health Research. So I've been right at the top of it, and I've been at all the levels all the way down. When you get near the top, there's an assumption that you have a lot more power than you actually do, because obviously you have influence in a different way, but organizations don't move. You can't just make a decision and then things happen. It's rare. You have to negotiate, you have to persuade, you have to convince, you have to get people to follow what you're saying. So in order to do that, you need to be really clear. So that's the first thing. Is it clear what you're saying? Do people actually understand what you're trying to say? And then that needs to be consistent, because you can say something once and you think it's been heard, but you probably have to say it quite a few times in quite a few places, and maybe to the same person over and over again until it sticks. And that can feel a bit weird. And then I think the final thing I said was honesty. So don't pretend things are other than they are. I think you need to be aware that if you were in a board meeting and you knew that the figures coming were not great or whatever, if you start running around going, "Oh, the company's on fire, we're all going to die," then that's not helpful. But you do need to, if you did the opposite and said, "Hey, everything's fine, we're all amazing," people wouldn't believe you and they wouldn't trust you. So they're less likely to do the things that you think are important. So there we go.
Yeah. So with it, almost anything, there's a balance to be found here, isn't there, in terms of those extremes? And it's usually kind of somewhere in the middle that you want to be placing yourself. I was wondering about this idea of stepping up into the next level and having these expectations put on ourselves and put on ourselves from other people as well. One of the things that I found really curious when I've done team training with senior leadership teams is that after a little while of going through the public speaking workshop, a lot of the time people would then start to reveal that they are a lot more nervous than they might have otherwise said.
Mm-hmm.
And that things would start coming out and they would say, actually, yeah, I'm the CEO or whatever, but I hate this too. And I really don't like getting up in front of everyone. And it's almost like the higher up the ladder you climb, the more you feel you're expected to be a certain way in terms of your confidence and your ability to speak. And then if you don't feel like you are that, the bigger the chasm between where you are and where you're expected to be. And that's where the imposter syndrome starts happening, because they feel like everyone thinks I should be confident. I am this title, but actually inside I'm not. Is that something that you've come across often?
Absolutely, and like the classic one is the kind of introvert extrovert thing as well, isn't there? Like, and if you look at studies on effective leadership, you'll find an awful lot of introverts are at the head of organizations, and some of those people might have learned to kind of, I don't want to say fake it. They've found a way to overcome their natural disinclination to speak in public, do presentations, that because they might have found a way to overcome it, but it doesn't mean that they don't feel that that's really hard, which then they start to question whether they're good or they're right or they can do it. But you don't have to be an extrovert to be a good leader, and I think, or a good communicator either. And I feel really blessed that the person that coached me in leadership formally for the first time was somebody who he'd spent a lot of time working with very senior leaders in organizations all over Europe, studying them, but actually living with them and kind of following them around and seeing how do they do it. And one of the conclusions that he came to was that, and it's in the book, which the name will come back to me in a minute, is that leadership is a social act. And what that is, that I think that's really powerful for anybody that struggles with this and thinks that it should be done a certain way. I think if you can understand yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your what you like to do, what you don't like to do, then you can find a way to be an effective communicator. And if you are like a very shy introvert, but you're good at one-to-one, then you could do loads of one-to-one. And actually that message will get, the trust will build, the consistency will be there, and people will follow you. Sometimes I think we imagine that it has to be in a big room and shiny and jazz hands and all of that. That works too. It has its place, but it doesn't have to be that way. It has to suit the individual.
Yeah, I think nowadays especially there seems to be more and more of every industry's got its conferences and its panels and its podcasts and its keynotes, and if you rise to a certain level of that leadership, then it's almost a given that you should be going on and doing this thing and speaking here and there, and I think if you can, then obviously that it's going to help you out because it's going to build your personal brand and your business brand. But there is no one size fits all, and you don't have to follow the exact route that everyone else does at the same time. And yeah, you can kind of cut out your own journey, I suppose, can't you, and whatever suits you.
Yeah.
Just switching gears then, Stephen, this has just come to mind then, in terms of personal leadership and personal development and, becoming the best version of you. I know for me that public speaking was a vehicle for my personal development. It's helped me to become who I am today. And it's not just helped me to speak, but it's helped me to start my own business and to be more sociable and to learn new things and like a whole different cascade of things. And would you say then that even if you were someone who is nervous and shy and introverted, that actually there's an argument to be said for pushing yourself into those discomfort situations, not just for the external kudos of it, but to build your self-esteem as a person and as a leader as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I would say don't do it for the external validation. because it's shallow as anything and it's gone.
Right. Yeah.
And people who chase that, it's like a drug. You know, you chase it, you want it, you want more of it. But is it actually giving you value? Is it actually giving you what you want? You know, so to go back to that idea of be clear about what you want to say. If you're constantly putting yourself out there for clicks or likes or cheers or claps or whatever it is, you might not be getting the message across in the way that is useful to everybody, because not everybody hears things in the same way. Not everybody likes to be communicated to in the same way. So let's go back to that introvert extrovert thing. You've got some people like to process slowly, some make decisions quickly. So you will have a mixture in any organization. So you might need some long form stuff that people can take away and read or watch at their own leisure and whatever, for the people that are reflectors. And you might want some shiny stuff for the people who just like to go with the energy. It's not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just humans. That's the way we are. But to your point there, should people push themselves into it? I would say yes, because the rewards are great. But for me, like, let's say we're talking about somebody who really, really does struggle with it. Why would there be any reward to that? And I think you need to look for the reward inside yourself. Now, if you can do any hard thing that challenges you, you grow. You know, resistance, so we know it in the gym, you get resistance at the right level, you build muscle, you get fitter, blah, blah, blah. It's exactly the same with anything like this. If you push yourself outside your comfort zone and you learn, but also you always get feedback. Sometimes that's uncomfortable. I've done things where, like, it's been crickets and you just think, oh, that was horrible, and I come home and I hate myself. The word I tend to use is dirty. It makes me feel dirty. Right?
Yeah.
You know that feeling. But I've never done anything where I didn't learn something about myself, or learn something about my message, or learn something about other people. So I think it's worth doing. But start, like, go back to that gym analogy. You don't walk into a gym, never having done it, and lift 100 kilos. You go in and you lift 15 kilos, and then you maybe do 20, and then you go up and up until you hit your limit. So you don't necessarily, I'd be interested to know what you think about this. I wouldn't recommend somebody that hates the idea to walk onto a stage with 2,000 people and have a go. I'd say, no, practice in front of 10 safe people. And, you know, then just keep going. I don't know. What do you feel about that? Is there an argument for, like, just go for it?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on the person. If you're naturally quite confident and skilled, then I guess you could jump further into that pool, into the deep end to begin with. But if you're already quite nervous and anxious, and this is a big challenge for you, then absolutely step by step is the approach to go. Because if you do have a bad experience, then it's only going to set you back even further in terms of your anxiety around the situation. So yeah, it's kind of, you know, slowly increasing the challenge bit by bit is the key. And it's kind of the same thing in when they have, if someone has arachnophobia, they don't just chuck you in a room full of spiders. They put you in a room and put a tiny little pretend spider on the wall on the other side of the room, and then you freak out for a minute, and then you settle down, and then they bring it a bit closer, and then eventually it's on your hand, you know, and then so it's that gradual desensitization, isn't it? Sorry for anyone listening who's got arachnophobia if I've just triggered you. All right, please take a deep breath.
I think you probably just helped.
Maybe, yeah.
There's no spiders were harmed in there.
Yeah. But yeah, so definitely the gradual approach is I think the key for most people. So just to switch gears again, Stephen, I wanted to come back to maybe someone who is either wanting to step up into that leadership role, or maybe they're already ahead of, or, you know, a middle role, and they want to go up to the exec position. What do you think mostly holds people back? In my view, and what I've seen is it's often that thing about having to speak up, and that seems to be a big blocker for people, but I'm sure there are many other things. What have you find are kind of the biggest limitations that people put on themselves?
Do you know what? I'll talk about myself, because I sort of went fairly quickly from, like, the bottom to, like, jumped a couple of rungs, and then bashed my head against the ceiling of the next rung for ages, and then even longer for the next rung, and was deeply, deeply frustrated. But then when I achieved that, and I looked around at the other people, I realized they weren't smarter or better or cleverer than me. So obviously some of them were cleverer than me, but my overall capacity to do things was equivalent. The only difference was they were doing it and I wasn't.
Yes.
And so I think we can self-limit in the sense that we think there's something special about the people that are there. And of course, some people have a capacity for like drive or leadership or effort, or they just work so hard that they achieve a level, and we're not all willing to put that work in.
Mm-hmm.
But all of those things being kind of equal, it's just about self-belief. I think it's just, but for me, I think the reflection looking back is that you kind of imagine that the people in the boardrooms, there's something special about them. Just people. Just people that have worked hard at something, achieved something, that's it. So they're not different. Sometimes I think people in those positions have ways and means of making it look like they're different and special to keep
building a bit of a moat between themselves and everybody else. Yeah.
But that's just human nature as well. So I think it would be that. It's like just realize that there's nothing, you don't get there without working hard. You don't get there without having, without applying yourself and going through some things that you don't want to do and learning to overcome obstacles and stuff. But fundamentally, they're just people. So
yeah, it's such an important point. It reminded me of something that I heard said at the Atomicon conference that I've just got back to. It was Andrew and Pete, the hosts of the event, in their keynote, and they were talking about something called the confidence paradox. And they were saying that you don't feel confident enough to do something until you've done it. And therefore it is a paradox, because if you don't feel confident, you tend to not go and do it. But once you've achieved it, you go, actually, I can do this. And what was the problem? So you have to get out of your own head, out of your own way, take the action, do the thing, knowing that on the other side of it, it will feel within your comfort zone once you have done it. And it happens in public speaking. It happens with stepping up into new roles. It happens with starting a business as well, doesn't it? A lot of the time, when it feels like such a scary thing until you've jumped in and figured out how to swim. Have you got any advice for people who are stuck on the other side of that, though, where they've not quite took the leap yet? I know what you're saying about just remembering that everyone is the same, but is there anything that people can do to just give themselves that extra push, whether it's about the accountability thing, or maybe giving themselves a timeline, or I don't know, any other coaching techniques that come to mind?
So the phases that I would take somebody through is very first one, and it takes a little bit of time, and you might need to do some exercise to figure out, but really understand who you are. We don't often do that, and I think it's worth going quite deep on that. And I mean, like, do you really understand who you are underneath who you're pretending to be? Because we all do that. We all have to survive the world, so we put a face on, we put masks on, we put a bit of a performance on, when you'll know about that, right? We go into different rooms. We all do it.
Yeah.
Can you stop, have a look, go underneath all of that? Who am I really? And then similar associated things like, what are my values? What do I really genuinely believe? And it's different for everybody. And it doesn't mean that somebody's right or somebody's wrong. So I've worked with a couple of clients in the last week. So one of them done an exercise like that, come back realizing he's really ambitious, right? He's been kind of denying that in himself for a long time, but actually gone, you know what, I am really ambitious. I want to climb the ladder. Another person did the same exercise, came back and went, do you know what? I value family way more than I realized. And so, you can imagine that those two people then are going to make different choices about, what do I do for the next few years?
Yeah.
What are your values? And do you really genuinely understand that? And I don't mean like just picking a list. I mean, think about it properly. And what keeps you well? Like, how do you sustain yourself? We all know we should exercise. We all know we should eat well. We all know we should probably meditate or walk in the woods or whatever, walk the dog. And we don't do all those things, but do a genuine audit of that. Really understand that. What is going to keep you sustained? Like for me, if I go a couple of days without raising my heart rate, I get the thoughts are not great. It's not good. So I know that about myself. I know that if I get stuck, things are going to rushing around my brain too much. I need to meditate. But that's because I've done this work and I've figured it out. And then from that, once you really understand who you are, then you can set yourself some goals. But those goals I would set off in the future. I'm not like 5 years. The little trick that I like to give people is to say, go at least 18 months in the future and then pick a significant date that is already there. Now that might be a birthday with a 0 or a 5 in it. So if you're going to be like 35 or 40 or whatever, it could be when your kids start school or when your kids leave school or, whatever. There'll be something that is at least 18 months away. And then use that as an anchor. As like, that's the point at which I want my life to be different. But then you need to think about not just work, it's how does work affect everything else? How does it affect yourself looking after yourself? How does it affect your family? How does it affect your connection with your community? And then what do you actually like doing? What I mean?
This is why you need a coach, because there's no point just writing down, is there? I want to do this. You've got to have a whole holistic approach to all of these things. And so many of us go through life with the blinkers on, just kind of what's the next thing, without really looking up to plan that long-term vision of where we're going. And it's so valuable to do that. But oftentimes you need a bit of a guide along the way to help you with that process and help you uncover things, which is, it's why it's such an important thing to get, and why I'm sure your clients get a lot of value out of being taken through that process, Stephen. I know we've only got a little bit of time left, so I wanted to ask you a bit more about your background in speaking, how that has come into your career as a coach, how you've used it. I mentioned before, I saw you speak live not so long ago, and you had everyone laughing in the audience and coming along. You did a fantastic job. Have you always felt that calm and comfortable in front of an audience?
The very first time I was asked to do it was when I was 15 years old, and I went to a small school in North Yorkshire, and I was head boy. How fancy does that make me sound? It wasn't a fancy thing at my school, by the way. It was but I was asked. I was asked to present something I think it was probably the chair of the governors. I don't remember. But I was told it was a really important person, and he was like an elderly man. And I was asked to go up on stage in front of the school and all the parents and just say a few lines and hand him something. Don't remember what it was. And I also that night had to organise a bunch of volunteers to sort out the car park in the rain. And I was very nervous, and the deputy head took me through those lines that I over and over and over again. And I didn't feel like I could say no, because it was kind of my responsibility. But
and how old would you have been at this point?
I was 15.
Okay, 15, right? So teenager.
Yeah, and I did it, and then people said, "Oh, you did really well, Stephen. You were great, fantastic, whatever." But I did not enjoy it at all. I didn't like it. Now it'll surprise people probably seeing this, because I'm talking quite fluently at the moment, but I'm a bit introverted. I'm very comfortable talking in front of doing this. Okay. And I will tell things about my life, because I've learned that that's useful to others. But it does drain me. I will go away from this, and I'll be tired from it. There's eyes on me, and but to your question, like, it's very kind of you to say that talk was good. I felt that one went well. It doesn't always, but I've learned. I do know that I can work a room. And it is.
I think it was the self-deprecating humor that won everyone over straight away. Always works a T, doesn't it?
But that's the thing, I think if you've done the work to understand who you are, okay, and then you for me, the confidence is I'm enough, right? I don't have to be somebody else or be something else. Obviously, there's a bit of performance to it. There's a little bit of an act, but not that much. Frankly, what you saw, I think, is pretty much me talking the way I'm talking now. And and I do make self-mocking jokes, and I do swear on occasion, and I tell anecdotes, and I will, we might be talking about leadership, and I might say something about Buddhism because it pops into my head.
Yeah.
It's what I'm like. It would be like
Yeah.
if you were sat there, if we were sat on a park bench, it would be the same. I'm not pretending. So I guess it comes over as authentic because that's basically what I'm like. Now, I do have the benefit of a grounding in, I do actually know what I'm talking about. So I've spent a year studying leadership. I used to teach it. So I suppose I can relax into that a bit because I could answer a technical question if it came up. But you'll know this, at the end of the day, people don't remember the majority of what you say. They remember how you made them feel. And that's different. And then what happened on that occasion, people came and chatted to me afterwards. They sent me DMs. I learned some stuff about myself. I got a client on the back of that, which was never my intention. Never even thought that was possible.
Yeah.
But I just enjoyed it. So
yeah, you said a lot there, mate, that I would love to dive in more to if we had more time. But the one thing that really stuck out to me is that thing of knowing yourself, and it is the foundation upon everything else. Because if that bit is rocky, then all the other work you do to try to be confident and charismatic, it's all on shaky ground, really. So starting with those foundations is just so important. It's great that you got a client out of it. Have you got any more speaking lined up afterwards from that? Are you going to be doing any more podcasts or keynotes or any bigger ambitions?
I do. Yeah, I'd love to, because it's a funny one. The last time I did a proper leadership talk just on my own was at the end of the COVID year. No, I think it was probably 21 actually. And there was at the NIHR where I worked, they had this leadership program that people went through. I think did it for like 5 years. I was involved for the last year, but they asked me to give the final closing talk, right? But it was such a weird thing because it was online, and they did the Zoom thing where it's not normal Zoom. It's the thing where you can't see all the people. So basically, I was talking to myself, but I knew there were 250 people listening.
Yeah.
Unusually for me, I scripted it and I actually wrote what I wanted to say. But when I did that, I stopped, and what I said was with passion, and I used words like love. I used really emotion because that's how I felt about those people. And I wanted them to go away feeling optimistic and feeling confident and feeling brave. And so I had those thoughts in mind. And I got a message later on. So you get nothing back, absolutely nothing. And then you shut it down. There wasn't even anybody in the building, so I just had to shut my laptop and go like, did it even work? I don't really know.
Into the void that went.
Yeah. But the next day I got a message from somebody I'd never met in my life, and all it said was, "Thank you. That's the best leadership talk I've ever heard." And
wow.
That was like, wow, that was amazing. Sorry, I don't normally brag like that, but what was going on there, I think, is that I have a certain capacity, a certain way of being able to, like I say, work a room, hold people's attention, tell a story, that kind of stuff. And if you use it for good, if you use it for serving others, then it can be really, really impactful. And you know this, your work's so amazing what you do. So I would love to do more of that, but I guess what I do is I do weekly lives, which kind of do a little pitch. If you go on my company page, Stephen Locke Coaching, they're always on there. I've got, every week there's a new one coming up. Similar format to this, I guess, but I don't have your charm and charisma, Ed. So
Well, I mean, I think you've got your own version, mate, which is quite all right. Yeah, it's a really good story. That speaking into the void is a really difficult thing when you're on virtual calls and you can't see anyone, and you just have to imagine that you've got this audience watching. Obviously, you pulled it off really well. Quick shout out to Kate, who said, "Thank you so much for an insightful episode." Kate, thanks so much for joining us. And LinkedIn user, who remains anonymous, but says, "Thanks, guys. Agree with Kate. Really insightful. Love the stories, Stephen, and totally agree. Being yourself is key." Absolutely. Please go and follow Stephen if you haven't already. And Stephen, anything else that you would like to tell everyone listening, whether they can find you somewhere, maybe a website, a download, what else shall people do?
I guess I would just, there is something I'd like to say. Anybody that's listening to this, thank you, Ed, first of all, for inviting me along to come and talk. And just to say to people that I think it's quite funny, those comments there. Hi, Phil.
Yeah, hi, Phil. Thanks, mate.
Just to say to people, you and I have both had to get over ourselves to do this. But if you think back, anybody watching this, you might think we're good at it or not good at it, could be better or whatever. But the fact you're listening means that we're coming across as if we have some authority, right? But we talked about this before, didn't we? That you're relatively new to this. I've been doing it for a few weeks and it's getting better. It's a new medium, but we're going, oh, it makes me nervous, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to learn, and then I'm going to learn again. So I just like to kind of like reveal that we're both nervous doing this. We're both like, oh, do we know what we're doing? Does anybody care? So if we feel like that, and you are an actual expert in speaking, but if we feel like that, then being a bit nervous, being a bit cautious is totally natural. But just have a go anyway. And if anything goes wrong, get in touch with Ed or me, and we'll give you a virtual hug and encourage you to have another go. And then as to like shouting stuff out, I've already said on my company page, that's what I do. I guess the pitch bit would be, I work with execs, I work with leaders, I work with teams, and I can't never quite think of the right word, personal coaching. It's that bit where work meets life, meets family, meets everything. So if anybody's looking for anything like that, get in touch.
There you go. I couldn't have put it better myself. If you want to have a dose of leadership and a sprinkle of hippie brought to your workplace or your career, this is the guy. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories and advice. Yeah, a little bit of to finish off there. Honestly, mate, really, really appreciate your time and just coming on and being so genuine. And anyone listening, definitely give Stephen a follow on LinkedIn. I know that you're always sharing lots of great content. Thanks everyone else for watching and joining us again and putting some comments on. Really appreciate that. That's everything to be said. Stephen, thanks again, mate. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch up with everyone soon.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye for now.